Let's talk about the most efficient tactics available in Final Fantasy XIV, or meta for short. Chances are, you've been told that if you're not on a meta job or using a meta strat, you're trolling. For the record, you're not a troll, but there are settings where playing the meta absolutely makes sense. Party Finder usually isn't one of them. So, when is the right time? I'm what you might call a meta slave, but not for the reasons you might think. I come from a background of hardcore raiding, long hour progression, generating limit break for speeds, or just hitting the boss over and over for parsing. All of that is to say, all I've ever known is the meta. Before we can answer that question, we should first understand what actually makes a job meta. And I think the conclusion you've probably already started to come to is that it depends on what you're doing and what your goals are. In the Party Finder, I think the real meta is playing the job you're most comfortable on. You want to bring your best performance to the raid, and the best way to do that is to free up as much brain space as possible to focus on the fight. The more comfortable you are on a job, the fewer mistakes you make, and the more damage you actually do. So in this context, every job in Final Fantasy XIV is meta. So if every job in the game is meta, why do we keep seeing the same set of jobs when we look at the top world progression teams? Well, that's where the context of the question changes. In Prog, the priority is to learn mechanics, and some jobs make that a lot easier. The clearest example is race casters. Red Mage and Summoner are extremely useful because they can help your healers resurrect teammates. If you bring both, you can effectively double the number of raises your party has access to, and that lets your healers conserve mana for actual incoming damage. Tank choices are also determined by the fight. Each tank has something it's really good at. Warrior is great at handling autos and has a short invulnerability. Paladin brings strong party mitigation and extra healing. Gunbreaker has high damage and good personal mitigation, and Dark Knight has strong buddy mitigation on top of exceptional damage. These are the kind of things teams consider when deciding which tanks to bring, instead of just defaulting to whichever sims the highest on damage. Healers are flexible as well, though most of the time you'll see an astrologian or scholar because they bring raid buffs and their overall healing kits are exceptional. So to summarize, the meta jobs for progression depend on the fight and how quickly you want to learn it. But what happens after the clear? Well, the enthusiasts in the Final Fantasy XIV community are going to start parsing the fight, and parsing completely changes what you want out of a team composition. For parsing, the ideal comp is the set of jobs that feed the most into raid buffs. That's where the list of actually meta jobs start to narrow down. For tanks, the best option is usually Double Dark Knight, because their buff contribution blows the other tanks in the water. For healers, the strongest feeder is White Mage, though you'll still often see Astrologian or Scholar because they bring raid buffs, which is important for kill time. For melee, it's Samurai, since they can fit 4 tendos in your raid buffs. For ranged, it's Bard because of its procs and songs. And for casters, it's Pictomancer because the feed is just overtuned compared to the rest. When you press a raid buff, your party gets around 20 seconds to pump as much damage as possible in that window, and all of that extra damage they do inside of your buff gets added back to your RDPS value. That means on buff jobs, your teammate's performance directly affects your parse. ADPS focused jobs like Dark Knight and Samurai really only have to worry about their own execution. So for parsing, you'll usually see people gravitate towards these jobs, and you'll see those comps reflected in the top statics and high-end logs. Now speeds are in a whole realm of their own. They build off parsing, but the goal shifts to getting the fastest kill time possible. This is where it gets complicated, because you also have to factor in LB generation when you're forming your comp. For tanks, going Double Dark Knight is an option, sure, but now you have to do the math on whether the passive LB generation you are losing is actually worth it. And if it isn't, how do you adjust your tank choices from there? To be honest, this could be a whole video on its own, and the really short answer is that it's fight specific. We've seen comps that look like this for one fight, and this for another. Needless to say, it gets very complicated, and that's why I consider speedrunning the pinnacle of optimization in Final Fantasy XIV. So now we've contextualized meta for progging, which favors strong toolkits, parsing, which favors buff contribution, and speeds, which favors LB generation and total raid damage over the entire fight. With that in mind, it's time to actually answer the question. I think the right time to play the meta is whenever you want. In the Party Finder, there's no requirement on what job you have to play. Everyone is free to play whatever, whenever. But once you move into organized group settings, statics, parse groups, speed groups, the expectation that you're on one of the strongest jobs in your role is more than reasonable. You also stand to gain a lot by diversifying into at least one meta option so you aren't locked out of opportunities you might actually be interested in. So what do you do if you want to parse on a non-meta job? Well, there are groups willing to accommodate that. Some might let you run it, and some might ask you to bring both your main job and the meta job so everyone can get their logs. Either way, there will always be a place for you, so you should feel free to play whatever you want. Optimization and figuring out what's meta is something I love to talk about, and I'm always hungry for more information. So tell me your hot takes on the meta, or what you've been yelled at for playing NPF down in the comments, and I'll get to them as soon as I can. If you want a place to talk about composition, meta, and progression without getting flamed for playing the wrong job, join the Discord. I'm also live Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Central, where all I do is raid and talk about raiding. So come hang out with me there as well. Hit that like button so I know to keep making videos like these, and make sure you subscribe because I'll be taking on the Arcadian Heavyweight tier live, and you'll see exactly how these meta decisions play out in real time. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.